We are going to pivot and bring in our guest, Azadeh Pourzand, a human rights researcher with a focus on Iran. Azadeh, welcome. We really want to get a sense of what's happening in Iran, but of course there is an information vacuum in terms of what the world can try to find out. Do you have a sense from your contacts, the very few who might have managed to reach out to you via the, I understand, limited internet they have right now, about what the feeling is like on the ground?
Yes, thank you for having me. I have to put a disclaimer, though, from the beginning that the internet shutdown and the anxiety among the Iranian population really also cuts access even to people like me who would have otherwise been able to be in touch with more people. But from the limited interactions, indirectly or directly, that I've had, I think how I can describe it best is anxiety. I think that the individuals that have expressed how they feel these days to me is lack of sleep, sort of glued to whatever news they can get, trying to understand what's their immediate fate. In terms of both in terms of the scale of the attacks, but also the retaliation of the regime against the Iranian people, and also what the near future holds for them. Those that I have spoken with, while quite scared when it comes to, hearing the bombs, or I've even heard of individuals in parts of Iran whose home have been destroyed, or, for example, whose home has been attacked by the Iranian authorities, sort of questioning whether this regime will actually go under the current circumstances or not, and also the scale of the attacks by Israel and by the United States. So you're talking about the people who are trying, if they can afford it, sitting in their homes worriedly with lots of anxiety, watching what's happening to them, around them. And I would describe it sort of stuck in the middle of two wars, one at home with their own regime, one in the sky with basically the bombs that are being thrown
Now, Azadeh, just now,
by the US and Israel.
yeah, Azadeh, just a few moments ago, the visuals that we were seeing was the skyline of Tehran. Now, you've really laid out a lot of the concerns of the Iranians that you've been able to speak to or text with, however you communicate with them. But before a couple of months ago, right, in January, there were protests, and that had largely been sparked, at least in the very beginning, over economic issues. Is that the main concern of Iranians now? Because I know that, of course, there's bombardment in Tehran and there are people leaving that city, but the vast majority of the country probably feels quite normal, unless you're in an area immediately near the bombardments.
The protests that basically that happened in January, and a few other protests in the previous years prior to that, were only triggered by economic grievances, but they were political in nature. And in particular, the last one, the Iranian people, I don't think they could have been louder than they were under the circumstances that they are in, which is absolute fear and mass-scale repression, and in the last round, mass killings, were loud and clear that they did not want this regime. So I just want to clarify that it was not purely economic, although economic situation has really put people in another level of despair that is probably very hard for us to understand sitting here. From what I understand from the testimonies that I have read coming from inside Iran, and from the little bit of bits and pieces I have gathered from those I know, is that as compared to the 12 days war, people who live in Tehran have not left Tehran as much as they did in the 12-day war. But at the same time, I've heard that some wish that they had left to places like the north of Iran, to the Caspian Sea. So Life in Tehran is absolutely frightening at the moment, as I said, also because of the level of repression by the regime, but also because of the bombings of Israel and the U.S. People who can afford, they are sitting in their homes, but that's also like it can last for so long, right? Like you need food, you need access to certain things. So I don't think that the country in general is living in any way or form an ordinary, normal life. Again, don't forget, you're talking about two layers of struggle and war. And between those two, and added to that, the economic circumstances, people who don't even have a way to make money right now, that I don't see any normalcy with kids not being able to go to school, with people not being able to go to work, and just this constant anxiety and living in a vacuum of information in ways that I don't think any of the other countries in the region under attack by this and that are experiencing. The vacuum of information is truly, on top of everything else, frightening and adds to this layer of lack of any level of normalcy or predictability.
Just a few more questions. I want to pursue that strand of talking about the protests, tens of thousands or thousands killed in January. And of course, so you're referencing protests from the past, including the Women Life Freedom protests. What sense do you have from Iranians you speak to in terms of how willing they are to protest again? I mean, you've sort of painted this anxious picture, both economically and politically. How willing would people be to build an opposition to end the regime, given these current circumstances?
Yes, I mean, I am an Iranian living outside, but I honestly really cannot ever even understand the level of courage and despair and resilience of my fellow Iranians inside the country. So it's really hard to speak on their behalf in any shape or form. But what I can tell you from my perspective is I think the Iranian people's narrative is getting lost in the international or in the regional geopolitical narrative, which is probably, for me at least, is the saddest thing to see. Um, Certainly, none of us have even had time to process what happened in January 8th and 9th, in particular in Iran with the public massacres, but also in general. I think that it is a very surreal expectation to have of a nation that is being bombarded from the skies, but also essentially at war with the regime. But the regime is at war with them. To come out any of these days and sort of stage a protest, they may or they may not. But that's entirely up to them and to their decision, because that is risking their life from multiple angles. And also the Iranian head of the Islamic Republic head of the judiciary has very bluntly threatened the Iranian people. On the media, the Islamic Republic constantly is threatening the Iranian people. So between not having the safety in terms of the bombs and also a regime that is openly retaliating against its people, not just now, previously, but now probably in a much crazier scale, I think that we should not put the expectation or the pressure on the Iranian people to have to come out now to once again express what they demand or what their aspirations. I think they have said what their aspirations are. And at this point, what matters is their safety and the fact that we guard those aspirations so that is not lost in the translation of this war that has sort of seems to have gone out of control.
Azadeh, last question. I want to delve a little bit into the complexity of Iran, because it's a lot of different ethnicities and a lot of people who want different outcomes. Some who continue to support the regime, some, and those who oppose the regime want different outcomes. Some want democracy, others might simply prefer a different core leadership. Can you talk a little bit about the diversity of the Iranian people?
Yes, Iran is quite a diverse nation, and what makes it even more special is that it had this diverse nation on their at least just the past 40 something years of repression has really stayed in solidarity as a nation. And when it comes to their dissent against the Islamic Republic, it was not. It was just a few years ago when woman life freedom was triggered with the death in custody of Jina Amini, a Kurdish young woman traveling in Tehran, and we experienced it also in the diaspora. Like, it didn't matter you're Fars, you're Kurd, you're Baluch. We were all together at the same time crying and also demanding the same things: justice, accountability, an end to the culture of impunity, freedom. And so this is important to note that while diverse the country, when it comes to human rights abuses, when it comes to aspirations for a better future, has really showed solidarity. But of course, when it comes to moments like this, the crises that you see, what I personally fear is that the external meddling will really damage the solidarity that we've seen when it comes to dissent among Iranians of different generations, and will add further pressure on the Iranian people, those of them at least who want a better future, in order to end up fighting with each other, rather than staying focused on the ultimate goal, which is a dignified Iran, for all Iranians, no matter what their ethnic, religious, or educational or socioeconomic background is.
Azadeh Pourzand, thank you very much for your time. We were really grateful.
Thank you.